So happy to be here today. As I was coming in the building, I'm like, I've never been in here before. They're like, it's new. I'm like, okay, I thought so. Um, Thank you, Ben. I see Liz Ryan here for a very long time. I spent time as a juvenile justice advocate. I still am, but they kicked me off all the boards when I started to go do political work. But Liz Ryan, and there's just the work that people do all across the country to put a spotlight on the disparities that exist within our juvenile justice system, disproportionately as it relates to our young women and girls, our young people of color, our Black and brown young people, is just so important. And I think it dovetails with this story. The panel that is going to come after I speak is about journalists as advocates. And for a very long time in my former life, as I like to say, I spent time as a spokesperson. I worked on campaigns, I advised candidates, I advised companies, and I worked very closely with journalists, many of whom I now sit next to and are my colleagues at NBC News and MSNBC. And I can't tell you how many times, when I go to the conferences and the things, and the people say, oh, the journalists are, they have no thoughts, they have no perspective. And I'm like, well, y'all have never been a spokesperson. Because as a spokesperson, when I pick up the phone and I am talking to a journalist or someone in the media apparatus about a story, or when they would pick up the phone and call me, they have a perspective. They have an angle of the story. And as a spokesperson or a communications person, it was my job to listen to what that angle and that perspective of your story was. And if it aligned with what I was doing and what the story I was trying to tell, I want to reinforce what it is that you think you know. If it diverted from what I knew to be true and the story I was trying to tell, I then have to provide you information to shape the story, to try and give you a different perspective. So I didn't go to journalism school. I was a business major. Okay, I just host a show now. But this idea that the journalists come to a story without a perspective is just not true. There is a perspective. Our perspective is informed by information. And we all only know, as I like to say, what we think we know, and far too many of us only know too much. And so I just think what we are doing today, talking about the epidemic, because that's what it is. The epidemic of murdered and missing Black women and girls is so important because so many people do not know. And it makes me think of Ida B. Wells' quote. And Ida B. Wells, who was an American investigative journalist, she was a stalwart of the civil rights movement. She was one of the founding members of the NAACP. She was an educator, a sociologist. But Ida B. Wells once said that, she wrote this in 1892, that the people must know before they can act, and there is no educator to compare with the press. There's no educator to compare with the press. But the press, too, must be informed. And as I was thinking about coming here today, I thought about the first time that I interned here in Washington, D.C. I'm originally from North Omaha, Nebraska. And when I was in college, I interned here in D.C. For an organization called Girls Inc., and I worked in their public policy office. And the family I stayed with, they lived way out in a lovely subdivision in Bowie. Okay, every time when I would get up to go to work in the morning, I had to walk 10 minutes to the bus stop, then take the bus to the metro, then take the metro into the city, then walk from the Farragut North metro stop. I was getting up way early. And the metro was expensive then, the metro's expensive now. Sorry, Mayor Bowser. And I would usually wait to leave work because it was easier it was a little cheaper after 7. Somebody's nodding in the back. Yes, it's cheaper after 7 when you take the metro. And one day I got on the metro, went to my bus stop, and I got on a different bus. So I'm like, oh, this is, I asked the bus driver, is this the bus that will take me to where I regularly go over in this neighborhood? And he tells me yes. I get on this bus, and I'm on the bus for like 20 minutes, and I'm in a neighborhood that I don't recognize. And it's dark because I told y'all I'm waiting to get on the bus after 7. And I pull the thing, and I get off in a neighborhood that I do not know. The streetlights are on. My phone's not working. I'm like, this is straight out of a true crime movie. And my phone is literally inoperable. Literally. The only number I could call was 911. I don't want to call 911. So I'm from Nebraska. So I see where the porch lights are on, and I go to the doors, different doors, and I knock. I had my little bag from work. I had my little suit on. Nobody opens the door in this lovely subdivision somewhere out in Maryland. I finally call 911, and I tell them, it's not an emergency, I'm not hurt, but I got on this bus, I'm in a neighborhood that I don't know, I'm not from here, and I'm wondering if you could send an officer to help me. Because, I must have thought I was somebody else. And about 15 minutes later, an officer shows up, 2 cars come, and the officers get out of the car, and I'm standing there with my little girls' Inc. bag, my little suit, my little flats, and I say, oh my goodness, so thank you so much for coming. He's like, step back. And I say, step back, I called you. We're just trying to figure out what's going on. My phone is inoperable. I go back and I explain to the officers everything I just explained to you. And the officers question me what I was doing out here. Where do I really work? Where am I actually from? What do I really do? And why was I knocking on people's doors and loitering on their porches? Because, sir, my phone is inoperable. I'm not from here. Where I'm from, we knock on the door and the neighbor will help you because I'm from Nebraska. And I tell the officer, I really don't appreciate how you're speaking to me because I called you because I needed help. And it seems as though you were talking to me as though I am a suspect. And he says, you seem to have an attitude. You seem to not want our help. So we're just going to go. And these officers get back in their cars and they drive away. And they leave me on this random road in the dark. My phone is inoperable. And I'm crying. I end up going door to door to door to door to door, just knocking and crying and hoping that somebody will open the door for this little bald black girl with her little girls' Inc. bag out in the middle of nowhere. Finally, someone opens the door. I call the one number I know with the family that I'm staying with, and the family that I'm staying with, the husband works for the FBI Missing Persons Division. And they have been looking for me because I didn't come home. I call and I explain what happened. They come and get me, and I was in a position of privilege because I could call somebody. Somebody cared about me. Somebody cared about where I was and what I was doing, and I didn't show up. But there are so many Black girls that look like me who are not in that position of privilege, that nobody is out there looking for them except for their families. That when they tell their story to the law enforcement officers that show up, they think something else is going on. That is why having journalists as advocates is important. That is why having people who understand, who are sympathetic, who want to learn are very important and critical. I don't think those officers meant me any harm, but I am somebody's daughter. I'm somebody's sister. I'm somebody that need help, and they left me on the road. Lord knows what could have happened to me. Thank goodness for the man in that suburb that opened the door. So you all are in this room because you do this work every single day. You care about this issue and so many more. Convening is to come together. It's kind of like a little revival. I grew up Baptist. It's a little revival for us to get the tools and the tips and take it back to our everyday spaces and places. But make no mistake, there are people in our communities all across the country that don't think the girls that we are talking about today deserve the time and attention to be found. There are people that assume that there's something else going on with these girls and why they were missing. And it is our job to help find advocates and allies in the work, to educate the people, and to uplift the stories.